This is why you don't use the built-in camera mic, because this is the microphone that is going to be work with me. I have it attached to this fire shovel, and it might be a little too sensitive to be talking at full volume, but I have it close enough to me to where I think it could be pretty good audio, which of course, an entire 30-minute video of me talking seems to be a important pursuit to make good audio. So thank you for bearing with me. Episode 1 had the fan on. The mic was attached to the camera, so it was maybe 5 feet away from me. The setup for episode 1 wasn't even supposed to be an episode or one. It was supposed to be a quick blurb, about a minute and a half, of just giving some encouragement to a few friends who had said they wanted to make more video content. And I had thanked those friends because they were the inspiration for that first one. If you know me, you know I love overdoing things, so I could have just maybe done it on the iPhone. But then I got the camera out, I got the microphone out, I got the light out, I made a fire, put the flannel on, and all of a sudden, we're 3 episodes into a little mini-series podcast of my thoughts while I'm living here in the backwoods of Maine. I don't know if this can be considered I'm in the middle of nowhere, Maine, which is probably, it's a really fantastic state. I don't have my state rankings in my mind yet, but Maine would be up there. And that's going to bring me first the title of this video, which is Everyone Wants to Read Thoreau and No One Wants to Do Thoreau Shit. To bring you full circle to why I'm here, specifically in this self-sustained farm in the middle of the woods in really far up north Maine. I mean, how far do I want to go back? Right? How long in the making has this been? To some degree, I feel like it's a culmination of my entire life. It's another chapter in the story that is my time on this earth. But I think specifically about 2 years ago, I started to realize, especially I had bought my camera, had the camera, and I was like, I wanted to take videos of people doing cool things. And I think, as I touched upon in episode 1, being your own subject is a very worthwhile cause for many reasons. And one of the reasons is that you get to video yourself doing cool things. But that means you need some cool things to do. And for me, it started with jumping on in some pretty cool projects. I think just doing some free content and getting used to having a camera in my hands ended up being my gateway into getting to travel a bit, making a few connections, pursuing a businessiness behind photography and videography. I ended up in Colombia for about 3 weeks, and then Quebec, Canada for about a month, and had come home and spent the winter taking a step back from a really, that type of push I made, I think back in 2021. And over the winter, having some more time to myself, getting my feet under me a little bit more, practicing that marination I brought up in episode 1, I ended up becoming inspired to do some backpacking of Europe, specifically the Camino de Santiago. If you know what that is, if you don't know what that is, it's a backpacking trail that leads from the northeast corner of Spain and France all the way across Spain, the country, about 600 miles, depending on different routes you take. And it really is one of the most fantastic experiences ever. It was my first time really traveling just solely on my own accord, and has been probably the most impactful thing I've ever done for my own self. And it deserves a full video, probably multiple videos. I'll be referencing that experience through this video, through others, because it has been such a big impact on my life. And after that experience, somehow I started reading a bit more Thoreau, philosophy, the Bible, having a bit more of a curiosity for life, trying to understand myself a bit more. I think when you it's just you, your backpack, and your 2 feet on an ancient path across an entire country, you have a lot of time to think and reflect, to meet really amazing people who inspire you, and to be a part of these experiences that make you look twice and you're like, did that really just happen? You get to be incredibly present. There are so many less distractions. So I found myself afterwards gravitating towards people like Thoreau, people like Gibran, the Bible, Plato. Those are some of the main authors that I started just to really dive into, and looking up more about some Greek and Roman Marcus Aurelius writings, philosophy. As if you can tell, like 90% of the things I talk about, I take a second and I stop and I think, right? Why? What does that mean? And while I was back home, I had another really great opportunity out west, really enjoying my time out west, doing some RVing, which was a whole nother experience I absolutely loved. Came back home for a bit, and I felt like a lot of things in my life were kind of at a halt. I went maybe a month really without picking up the camera. I felt myself waiting and being just a bit more apprehensive to do anything. And at the time, maybe a story, the full story for another day, but at the time, I had sold my car, paid off all my debts, bought a very nice bike, and in pursuit of minimalism, essentialism, the idea of becoming very mindful of life, of every step, of everything that I do, instead of being maybe in this mindless zone of I just get in a car and go, to really pay attention to my intentions, being very mindful of my life. So I had a bike and a lot of free time, and what better way to explore than on the saddle of a very nice e-bike. It was early July at the time. A friend had invited me up to visit her in New Hampshire. So for the first time ever, I bought a tent. I bought some panniers, the bags that go on the back of a bicycle. I packed my camera, a journal, some maybe 3 changes of clothes, some essential foods. I think it was like oatmeal, peanut butter, and honey, some protein powder. And I decided to go on a bike trip, which that deserves a whole nother... I was in the back of a bicycle for 28 days, about 1,000 miles, starting in Connecticut, going up to New Hampshire, heading all the way up to northern New Hampshire, across to Maine, ending up almost in Canada, swooping back down and stopping in the mid-coast of Maine to come back home because I had a few things to take care of. And I guess even as I'm formulating this in the retelling, but even I remember in the moment, it's like I don't really know why, right? Maybe there's some logistical or some kind of fantasy, right, about this, a bike packing trip, how fun. But really more than anything, it was a feeling. And I didn't know what exactly it was, but I knew what it felt like that I was looking for. So I go up, I visit my friend. I have a few funny experiences camping along the way. I get to refresh up at her lake house in New Hampshire, one of my favorite places in the world. And then I head up to the northern New Hampshire. I hiked Mount Washington. I went across through Maine, through these farms and all this land. There's a lot of land in Maine. I think being from Connecticut, which is a pretty densely populated state, there isn't just rolling green of farmland or super rural areas. And everything's generally a town or a suburb. So it really was a new experience understanding that a New England state could be as vast as it is in Maine. I made my way to Bar Harbor. Incredible place. Super cool place. Really incredible. And then I headed up to Calais, which is the port entryway to Canada and back to the US. And while I was in this area, through warm showers, if you've ever done some bike packing, it's an online resource for people who are cross-country biking. People offer their yards that you can camp in, so you don't have to stealth camp. Like I had to a few times, just kind of pitch my tent where I didn't think I'd be bothered, just so I can get 4 or 5 hours of sleep. But warm showers made it much easier. If I was in the area of a host, I would be able to message them and say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. Could I camp out in your yard? Sometimes they would have a room for me to stay in. Sometimes they would just have a meal outside. Sometimes it would just be hey, yeah, do your thing outside. Really don't know if I could have done something like that without warm showers. And I met one of the hosts, and he, again, we're talking probably another few videos with at least referencing him or talking about him. And he was a professor for, I think, about 30 years in the same field. At one point in time, I was getting my master's in. It's called Applied Behavior Analysis. And right when I met him, I forgot how even that came out, but it just came out very naturally, right? Like, oh my, and then once you meet, it's a pretty narrow field. So once you meet someone who's also within that field, even like psychology, but specifically ABA, it's like, whoa, small world. And we could talk the same language about life and behavior and people. And so when I would tell him my stories, it'd be more of a efficient way of communicating. An incredible guy who lives with his partner as well, she's an incredible woman, and beautiful house up here in Maine. And I forgot the circumstances, but I ended up staying 2 nights. I met another friend, a friend of the hosts, who is another just really cool guy. Let me tell you, let me get close. This is going to be my first time bringing this up, because I need you to really listen to this one. If you ever don't have anything to do, go on a nice long bike trip. You're going to meet some amazing people. I think I could delve deeper into the psychology or why it happens. Same thing with backpacking, right? If you backpack Europe or walk across the US, whatever it may be. But it's really it's weirdly amazing. Weirdly amazing. So I'm meeting all these great people, right? Boom, boom, boom. Beautiful house. Somehow got an amazing meal, amazing breakfast. Stayed there 2 nights. And at some point, he had brought up, hey, I would like to show you this cottage that I have, which is where they grow their food. They have chickens. He has an entire workshop. The house itself is just everything you need. Small little kitchen, small dining room, sliding door to disconnect the bedroom, but if you were to see it, it looks like one big room. And he had mentioned hosting others and people coming here, helping, learning, I guess doing maybe some, if I might be the first one, but doing some creative works, podcasting. And I remember when he brought me here, it was just like, whoa. I'm doing all this reading about sustainability, simplicity, minimalism, essentialism. And I find this place with this really amazing guy who teaches others about this mindfulness way of living. And I mean, yeah, these are the double takes I had mentioned, right? You kind of have to double take and be like, whoa, I found exactly what I was looking for. So funny enough, I start the trip. My plan was to go all the way down to Florida at one point, or at least back home. But after I left here, I was just like, oh, I don't really want to do this anymore. A few people had reached out to me and were like, hey, when are you coming back home? Hey, we have would you do some photos for this, some videos for this? And so I was like, yeah, sure. let me get on a bus. I put my bike on a bus in Rockland, Maine, made my way back home to Connecticut, settled back down there for a few days. And yeah, I think it's a good litmus test to, is this what I was looking for? Is that you have that kind of, that drive, that feeling of something's out there. And then when it finds you, it's like that craving has been satiated. So now you can reflect and say, okay, that's the thing that scratched that itch. That's the thing that satiated my soul. So then I also had a drive to move to Vegas for a little bit. I'd gotten a job out there, planned to plant some seeds and do some networking, meet some people. And again, I mean, this deserves the mic again. I met some amazing people. I didn't know anyone in Vegas. I don't even know, again, we could probably come up with some somewhat reasons I went out there. Again, we're just going to go back to, I just had a feeling. I go out there. I just met a few of the most amazing people. Amazing people. Amazing experiences. But that had kind of run out, I think. And I was a bit of a loose cannon. Hard to believe, right? The guy who's backpacking, bikepacking, just kind of going out on his own whim. Bit of a loose cannon. So my original plan on staying until the end of January, I ended up finding a way to get back home for December, which I was really grateful for, spending time at home with family, and I had some amazing work that I got to do and kind of catch this really big wind with photography and videography. Like huge, big wind. And as I was home in December, and I was like, well, okay, here until Christmas, what's next? It's the start of the new year. Where am I going? I knew I kind of wanted to be back in Connecticut in February and March. So I was like, okay, I have 6 weeks roughly to kind of play around with. And I could not tell you how I don't even know how to explain it, where it was just like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Like that's where I'm going. I'm going to call my friend who I haven't spoken to in a few months, and I'm going to say, hey, would you like a guest? Would you like to host for this winter? Which, if you're on a farm, is a pretty funny question, because the idea of, farming in the winter is a bit limited. I mean, there are things to do here. And I talked to him earlier today, and I was like, yeah, well, that's kind of the fun. That's the point, is it's a bit easier to farm when it's 70 degrees and, drizzles of rain and fertile soil. It's a little bit harder to grow in the cold. It's a little bit more isolating to be a bit stuck and in maintenance mode. And if there's anyone that knows and can give some guidance in terms of quote unquote growing in the cold, which is what I think I'm doing right now. I think I'm the one growing in this cold, frozen environment. I'm finding a way to grow, just as he finds a way to continue to sustain this farm, to grow his food. And we talked on the phone. He seemed a bit pleasantly confused. And he was like, yeah, let's do it. So I took a bus. I stopped in Boston for a little bit, had some fun in Boston, took some pictures, worked with a friend, had like the most amazing time. I went to school around Boston, and I think I got a bit sick of the city, Boston. I think it grew a little bit old on me. But now every time I go back to Boston, I'm like, oh, I'm just having the best time in my life. And I did. I had one of the best times in my life on New Year's Eve. And took that final bus from Boston up to Bar Harbor. He picked me up, another 2-hour drive in the middle of the woods. And now I'm here. I've gotten to experience the feeling of real aloneness, which I think is a feeling that is a bit overwhelming at times. I think I've got to dabble in that by traveling, again, on my own, doing some backpacking. You find a couple days where, you don't talk to too many people, don't see too many people. But generally here, when you're on a farm and you're not driving around, going to shops, I've gone grocery shopping twice. The host and his partner and I have gotten to hang out and visit. And I think to be in this environment of loneliness and really intentional living, holy smokes. I mean, even just listen to me. I don't know if I do something like this in Connecticut with the same type of presence on the camera, with the same just whimsical, lighthearted enjoyment, with the complete taking off of the pressure of this becoming something more than just a video journal, a video diary that I get to make look cool and beautiful and share with people and just kind of see what happens, having no pressure to be like, this has to produce this, or I'm trying to get this in return. It's like, no, this is just a labor of love. I just really have enjoyed setting this camera up. I don't know if I always will, but in this very moment, it's like, wow, yeah, this is the coolest thing. I'm just having the time of my life. And, you really get to start kind of drinking the same Kool-Aid as Thoreau, who obviously is a very popular writer. And I guess when I do say Thoreau, I just don't mean Thoreau or Walden. I mean that style of writing, right? Again, a bit more bare minimum, a bit more very intentional, mindful. There's been plenty of authors, new and old and ancient, who have really dove deep into the ideas of mindfulness, of treading lightly. And to that point, it's a bit, it makes me wonder if these writings are they resonate with people. They're classics. People still research and read and think about these authors, artists, and it really resonates with a lot of people. But then they don't do it, right? Maybe they don't know how to. I mean, I know, speaking from my experiences growing up